Hi everyone, we're here today to talk about the initial treatment effectiveness results from the Menière community. So in a second, I am going to present you with the top 10 most effective treatments for Menière. Before I do that, a word about our methodology. This data is sourced from 506 of our members who have reported 455 unique treatments tried for Menière. That's actually a really huge number. If you've taken our survey, you'll know that users report on the treatments they've tried, as well as effective and or current treatments that they're taking, and they tell us the severity of their condition and the severity and frequency of their vertigo attacks before and after treatment. What we're doing is using a Bayesian machine learning methodology to process all of these data points into a score for each treatment. If you continue listening to the end, then I'll be talking a little bit more about that methodology after I present the results. But I think that's enough build up. Let's go. Here we go. These are the 10 most effective treatments for Meniere's disease. So before I actually go into the individual ones, let me talk a little bit about the graph. So obviously you're seeing a list of 10 treatments here. And alongside each treatment, you see a horizontal bar. Which is an indication of how effective that treatment is. The further to the right the bar, the more effective the treatment. The shorter the bar, or the narrower range that it represents, that represents the fact that we're more certain about the effectiveness of that treatment. So the other thing to note is that we've excluded from this list any treatment for which there were less than 10 reports of users having tried that treatment. So for instance, some of the things that you might expect to see which aren't on this list are surgeries, which is kind of a last resort for Menière. So there weren't so many who had tried it, although it does appear to be quite effective. As the Menière community grows and we have more and more reports of treatment effectiveness, obviously those things as well would also be included on this list. So let's talk a little bit about the items here. The first one on the list was actually a bit of a surprise to us. We didn't necessarily expect an alternative therapy to appear first on the list. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the acronym, what this item one is a special kind of chiropractic treatment called upper cervical chiropractic treatment. 24 out of the community have reported trying it, and 12 of them reported it was successful, along with 4 who say that they are still currently using it even though they didn't find it especially successful, and another 4 who mentioned it not as a successful treatment or an especially effective treatment, but a treatment that they are continuing nonetheless with the treatment that they did deem to be effective. And all of those statistics taken together with the level of improvement that users are reporting has pushed this into first place, and actually it occupies an effective range which we don't really see from any of the other treatments. Number 2 on the list is perhaps less surprising because it's probably the first response to Meniere's disease from the medical community, i.e. reduction in sodium or salt intake. Indeed, more than a third of our users, more than a quarter of our users report having tried it. What you can see here is that less than a third of those actually say that it's necessarily effective, which is why it occupies a lower range here in terms of expected effectiveness. While we're on dietary changes, another one also appears on this list in number 5, which is caffeine reduction, which is again quite often recommended by the medical community for Menière. You can see actually that caffeine reduction and low sodium, both dietary changes, actually occupy quite a similar range, although we have higher certainty regarding the range of low sodium, hence the smaller bar. The third item here is the only physical therapy in our top 10, and that's vestibular rehabilitation. And then the fourth item is beta histine. It's the first of of 4 drugs which appear on our list. Beta histine is an antihistamine that's often prescribed for Menière. And what you can see is, again, about a fifth of our community, even more, have actually tried this, but once again, roughly a quarter of them are reporting it as effective. Further down the list, we have a number of other drugs, starting with hydrochlorothiazide, which is a diuretic, and also unspecified diuretics, for which there were many reports, users who said that they're simply taking diuretics but not which ones. These come in towards the bottom of the list, along with the sedative Valium in terms of drugs. And finally, the other category represented here is lifestyle changes. Both occupying a fairly similar range in 6th and 7th place. We have exercise and stress reduction. Perhaps not all that surprising that stress reduction comes up on this top 10 list, considering how many people listed it as a stressor for Meniere's disease, or a trigger for Meniere's disease. But it is maybe surprising that exercise shows up here as well as potentially being effective, albeit with a fairly wide range of possible effectiveness. Last thing I'd say about this list is that perhaps aside from NACA, all of these treatments really appear fairly close to one another in terms of the potential effective range, and none of them really exceed far beyond 2 levels of improvement in terms of the expected effectiveness, which is perhaps not all that surprising, considering by and large almost no treatment reported by our users is reported as effective by more than a third of those who have tried it, and that's very much reflected in the data here. So I wanted to take a couple more moments of your time to describe the methodology for those of you who are interested. So I mentioned before the data that we collect. After we collect that data, we go through a process of normalizing it, meaning that for treatments, we categorize it into a number of different categories that you already saw represented, such as drugs, dietary changes, as I mentioned, things like surgeries and others. And then for drugs and supplements, we add additional data, classifying whether we know the brand name or not, what pharmacological classes the drug belongs to, such as an anti-inflammatory, what is the active ingredient or substance that is used in the drug, how it's taken, which we call the root name, as well as additional features such as extra strength or extended release, things like that. We try to add as much of this metadata as we can, albeit we are limited by the amount of detail that the users provide when they fill in the questionnaire. And then we take these features into our model, which looks something like this. What you can see here is all of the data that I've mentioned that we've collected, the tried treatments, and then they're broken out into those that were classified as effective, those that were classified as other treatments taken alongside the effective, and those that were classified as current treatments not effective. All of this is based on our user input. And then at the other end here, we have the change in indicators. So the overall severity change and the change in vertigo attacks, frequency and severity. What our model does in 2 stages is it actually calculates these numbers here. The first is a set of probabilities. The probability essentially that each treatment is going to be classified in one of these 3 states, effective, other, or current. And then the level of improvement that's actually driven by the treatment in each of those states. I mentioned before that we use a Bayesian method. The reason why we're doing that is because it's excellent at handling sparse data, and it actually enables us to calculate not just a single value for each of these things, but a likely range for the probability that it will be effective and the amount of improvement that it will lead to when effective. And we are able to take all of these numbers and then put them all together into the ranking algorithm, which produces the score that I showed you before. That's it. Thank you very much for listening. Looking forward to keeping these updated as we grow the Menière's community, and following up with further deep dives into our data and our methods. Thanks and goodbye.